So everybody, it is the middle of the NFL offseason, sure. But what you may not know is if you're in the States, the CFL regular season starts up again 2 weeks from Thursday, so 16 days from now. And I had to call in the big guns for this one. And with me is what I would say the lead CFL sideline reporter for the league in TSN and also Canada Soccer, Matthew Scianitti. Sir, how are we doing on this Tuesday afternoon?
Griff, you said the big guns, and I was about to say, who else is coming? Who's coming on? I was excited. I appreciate that, man. You humble me. It's good. It's good to be on, man. My pleasure.
Absolutely, absolutely. One thing I want to ask you about, just jump right into it right away. You and I have experienced camp because obviously the Toronto's the team that we're closest to. You closer than I, just for proximity. But with Toronto, because I was trying to kind of get this out of Ryan yesterday, but if you had to paint a picture of where you feel like they are now to where they were last year, how do you compare the identities of these two Argos teams? Because obviously, look, year to year, football's a never changing sport.
The Argos are now flirting with dynasty, and I know that sounds interesting given the amount of players they lost, particularly on defense.
Yep.
And some of the massive leaders, when you think of Florian Arumilade, Deshaun Amos, among them. Like, this is a team with their core, Chad Kelly, Wynton McManus, Tavares Daniels, Kadeem Carey, DeMonte Coxey. This is a team that could, if they get to another Grey Cup, they've now surpassed Winnipeg as being the dynasty team in the league. And it's a wonderful thing, I think, when you consider, if you're an Argos fan, if you look at the timeline of the last 25, 30 years, 40 years even. I was asking Mike Pinball Clemens, the general manager, this last week, and he corrected me and said, when he was the coach in the early aughts, the Argos would go to the East Final quite a bit, but then they would get beaten by the Montreal Alouettes until they were able to take that monkey off their back in 2004 when Clemens led the Argos to a Grey Cup over the BC Lions in Ottawa. But he's always wanted consistency, and he and I talked about this. Like, the Argos would do this: they would win, and they would go like this, and then they would be like middling or frankly bad for an extended period of time, and they would go this. You think about that within the context of 04, 2012, 2017. But then Pinball talked about wanting to build a sustained culture and build sustained success. Ryan Dinwiddie comes in, and he really was an unknown commodity in terms of being a head coach. And I've been around Scott Milanovich, Mark Trestman, Corey Chamberlain. Ryan Dinwiddie has dealt with, now, Scott Milanovich dealt with the team kind of being homeless in a sense, where they played, there was a year in 15 or 16 where they basically played home games in Hamilton and in Ottawa, which was absurd. But the Argos under Ryan Dinwiddie have dealt with, apart from, they have a stable base at home, they train in Liberty Village, and then obviously they have their home base at BMO Field, but they've dealt with everything, like injuries, Chad Kelly suspension, all the attention around that, the negative attention around that, the turnover of the roster, turnover within their own front office, and they're the best team in the East consistently. And that really points to, Ryan Dinwiddie talked to us about this yesterday, where he goes, I just set the standard and I let the players go ahead and take care of it in the locker room. And that's worked for him, especially when you look at the leaders that he's really leaned on. Ryan Hunter, the most outstanding offensive lineman right now. You take a look at, I mentioned Wynton McManus. You can even extend it to Ferris McFadden in the back end. As I already mentioned, DeMonte Coxey, Tavares Daniels. Like, there's leaders on this team now that kind of set the tone for everything the team does. And really the most significant offseason signing for the Argos was retaining Wynton McManus, because we've all heard the rumors that the Hamilton Tiger-Cats were really in on him. I know the Hamilton Tiger-Cats were really in on him, and he stayed in Argo. And that was a big, I mean, not a big get because he was already in Argo, but that was a significant moment in the offseason. Because had Wynton McManus gone to Hamilton, my tone would be completely changed, and I'd say, well, the Argos have to look for a new leader, because that, kind of Mike linebacker who as Enoch Mwamba was before Wayne McManus, really, the guy who kind of takes charge, the guy who kind of leads the team and really conducts the vibe. Even irrespective of Chad Kelly, like they're going to start the season again without Chad Kelly. And I'm interested to see what Nick Arbuckle looks like with a bigger workload. Certainly he won the Grey Cup and was Grey Cup MVP and really didn't miss a beat and stayed within himself against Winnipeg and BC last November. But the Argos are flirting with dynasty, and that is something I never thought I would say about the Toronto Argonauts. I always thought that the Argos would do this because that's just the nature of the organization. But they're building something really special, and this season, I look at our teams in the East. I look at Hamilton, and I've consistently said, my opinion is they have the most to lose because they have put so many expectations. They brought in big guns. They're trying to build a brand new culture there. And there's going to be a hyper-focused sense on what happens between Scott Milanovich and Bo Levi Mitchell. But everything in that roster is like, okay, there's question marks, not bad question marks, but like, what is this roster going to produce? You know what the Argos are going to do, irrespective of, changes, irrespective of bringing guys in, irrespective of guys who will have to step up this year for some of the guys who've been lost. But the Argos have set the standard now. And I know the Alouettes don't like hearing that, and I know the Red Blacks don't like hearing that, but it's the truth. They're the defending Grey Cup champions, won 2 championships in the last 3 years, and right now, if I was a betting man, you've heard me say this, their basement is the East Final.
Yep.
Like that's the floor for them, and even like for them to go ahead and be in another Grey Cup, I don't think you can go ahead and dismiss it. That is, I'm not saying they're a shoo-in, but I wouldn't be shocked if come November we're talking about the Argos representing the East Division of Winnipeg again.
So I also find it kind of funny too. I start coming along, and then all of a sudden they're verging on dynasty. Maybe it's something in the air with me. I don't know. Maybe
you just brought the good vibe, brother. Maybe you did.
Maybe I did. My thing with Toronto right now too is I completely agree with you on the Winton stuff. They did lose some leaders, but at the same time too, this team, from when I've just gathered from them, even yesterday, it's just next man up. Like I even asked Brian, like, hey, who's someone you look to see as a leader? And he's just like, hey, I just tell them, you go, you guys figure it out. Someone will have a voice. Someone may not be the best job at having a voice. The fact that there's such that trust within that room to where you don't have to worry about the players. Oh, who's going to lead this? Who's going to lead that? They just know that, hey, someone organically is going to come along and take that mantle and do that. It just speaks volumes as well to like where they are as a team and a culture just within the locker room. Because I know last year, look, not saying there was anything in the locker room. It's just a lot of people were painting the picture that there was a lot of negativity in the room, which we don't have to get into. It's just something I've observed.
No, I mean, there's a lot of attention. There's a lot of attention, especially when you have your quarterback be suspended for half the season.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of question marks. And not only that, they dealt with a ton of injuries. And when you think about what they were able to overcome and how much of an underdog they were to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Yep.
Like what more do they need to prove to anyone in the CFL? Like this is the inform, the standard franchise right now. I know it might be shocking to say that given the question marks around ownership constantly, the question marks around attendance, the question marks around television audience. Sure, those are all valid talking points. But the Argos have weathered a lot of storms under Ryan Dinwiddie and under Pinball Clemens as GM, and certainly you can go to extend that under new president Keith Pelley. But like, if I'm putting question marks on anybody, I'm not putting a ton of question marks on the Toronto Argonauts. I'm looking throughout the East Division, putting a ton of question marks on everybody else because they're the teams that have to catch the Argos.
So my thing too with that, and I love that you say that, but I since I am a bit of a betting man, they last 3 Grey Cup champions were all massive underdogs. I'm just trying to figure out the number from Toronto for last year, which they were plus 320 on the money line to win. And that spread got up to 7.5 points. So there were not a lot of people giving them a lot of chances, but that's when they thrive the most, is when you count them out and you don't expect them at all. The one thing I will say about Hamilton right now is I'm still bullish on them because I drank the Kool-Aid last year. Last year, I was like, you know what? They were close. They didn't get there. This was the 25th anniversary since 1999. You know, they're not going to want to go past 25 years. And they just got off to a start that I don't think they could catch up with. I think they just fell flat.
0-5 is a tough start for anyone to try to overcome.
Yep. And then I just knew for them to, like, when they had those games like Saskatchewan where they're winnable games, but then look, one side of the ball is doing all that it can to win, and one side of the ball is not helping out. That's recipe for bad football. Meanwhile, I just still say this though, but Ottawa is still the most intriguing because for them, and you and I were in the room last year when they lost to Toronto. We got here, but how do we keep going up from here? Because it's easy to get there, but it's just as easy to not be there. And that's that's a big question with me with Ottawa.
Yeah, I think everyone wants to see who Drew Brown is. Drew Brown was incredibly accountable last year. Like He was the first guy who would come out. I have to be better. I need to be the guy. I need to try hard. And that's all super, super, super admirable. But this is it's a big year for Bob Dice. Big year for Sean Burke, the general manager. And that's the one thing about Ottawa is trying to recapture what they built 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Like they were the standard in the East. And we can have all the conversations we want about them not re-signing Trevor Harris and the team. Yeah, but that's 6-7 years ago. Now it's you've taken that first step, you've gotten back into the playoffs. Now you have to challenge and you have to be consistent. And that's the one thing that every team in the East has struggled with. I mean, Montreal, they didn't struggle with it. They were consistently good throughout the year. I look at certainly Hamilton and Ottawa in particular. Like you have to get off to a strong start because the Argos are going to rope a dope if they have to. And we spoke to Ryan Hunter about this yesterday, and he was just like, sometimes we'll go ahead and we'll give teams 3, 7, 10, 14 points starting us. And then we kind of look at each other on the sidelines and go, okay, guys, let's go. It's time to go. And they're able to flip the switch. Now, you can't always rely on that at some point, and Winnipeg certainly has embodied that the last few Grey Cups, which is like you can't always rely on that because your core gets older. Turnover is super important. This is why if there's any question, if there's anything I mentioned about the Argos, it's the one thing about the Bombers could sustain their excellence because they just kept getting incredible performances out of Willie Jefferson and Adam Bighill, Brady Oliveira, Andrew Harris when he was there, certainly Zach Collaros, Kenny Lawler, Drew Wolotarski. Like all of these guys kept producing. But when they would get to the Grey Cups, they just, not that they would fizzle out, to be frank. They would just fizzle out. And that's certainly, Mike O'Shea would probably look at me and say, football's about execution, Scianitti, and that the other team just executed better than us. But I initially, when I take a look at the Argos, if they're going to be on that mantle now as the team that's flirting with dynasty, the team that's the standard bearer in the league, that turnover is super important, which puts a ton of pressure on personnel executive John Murphy and Mike Pinball Clemens because, again, I mentioned the turnover that they've had in the front office. Vince Magri has gone, one of the top personnel guys to the Buffalo Bills. Alex Russell has gone to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. It's down the QEW. So there's an intense focus on the guys that they brought in, and it's hard always to judge the CFL based on training camp, and certainly based on the first month of the season. Sometimes guys don't really show themselves until about late July, August, and then the real stars of the league start to emerge around Labor Day. But that turnover is going to be super important for the Argos because if we're going to see a real push in the East, then it's going to have to mean that Ottawa and Hamilton and Montreal under Davis Alexander, let's not forget that, all have super strong starts.
I didn't say Montreal originally because look, I didn't see too much into Jason Moss just because for me that first year, the first time I saw him was after the East Final. But when I got to know him in that little stint there and at the Grey Cup, he has that same, let's use a 2025 word, aura to him that Ryan Dinwiddie brings, where guys want to play for him. They will buy what he is selling. So Montreal,
very different coach though. Like Jason Moss, what he says goes. If Jason Moss, when Jason Moss tells you you're going to stand up in training camp and you're going to speak French, you're standing up and you're speaking French. Ryan Dinwiddie's a little different. He'll come in, he'll set the game plan, then he'll look and say, I'm giving you everything. Now I'm empowering you to do it. So different coaches, but I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I'm not saying that they're the exact same. I mean the same as to like obviously look, there's the more stylist from there from Moss to Dinwiddie, but I mean like the players, like no matter if you're in Toronto or Montreal, they buy to what they're selling. And also too, the defense as well for Montreal is not, they're still going to be there. I just think there's that kind of chip on their shoulder from them that Toronto had going into last year, where it's, we were the top dogs all along in the East Final. They came into our house and beat us. So now they kind of know how it feels. Although that game was on a just swivel on a dime. And then there was the, I believe it was the Benji Franklin, like just weird interception pick six. And then Grant, I believe, at a punt return in the East Final as well. So where that game drops on a dime, kind of like Mark Anthony Duquois in 2023 with the early pick six. You make excellent points about Winnipeg, because I think everyone's waiting for them to fall off. But the thing I will always say is I just can't count them out, because last year, look, they did the same thing. They started off 0-2. The first game against Montreal, they got smoked at home. And then you snap your fingers and they're there. And I feel like this year, with hosting the Grey Cup for them, there's going to be not internal pressure, but there's going to be motivation. I think they actually take that and say, hey, we want to be here when it's -20 outside and there's 30,000 people, Matthew included, freezing on IG Field in
be freezing
in November. So like with the, like, because the West, I still, and this is the one thing I really love about this league, is that because with the NFL, as you know, you have your set teams every year. You know, you have your Kansas City, Detroit's, Baltimore, Buffalo, etc., and Philadelphia. The CFL is such a year-to-year league that I love, that 1 year you're good, 1 year you're bad. Like this year, like, for example, I'm not saying I have faith in them, but I'm really excited to see what Mark Kalam brings to the Edmonton Elks. Just as like, hey, he's getting his chance, he's getting his voice. But
Mark Killam's a good coach.
That's
Don't sleep on Mark Killam. He's he gets guys to play for him.
Yeah, he like, that's the thing. He brings that same style that, like, we saw Corey Mace last year, but we saw that with the Riders, where they got off to the hot start, kind of fizzled around the summertime. They lost that really weird game on the CNE night in Toronto, to where fans were saying, like, all right, the honeymoon's over, to where it's like, give it time. They got there, and I think they just ran into the wall of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the West Final, to where, look, out West, you have Winnipeg, you have Calgary, not Winnipeg, Calgary, Saskatchewan, Edmonton, BC. Calgary's the only team I'm still kind of like, I don't know what to think, just because I think it's that team that's putting off the rebuild, where it's, we're trying to go for it. We'll see what happens. I also think a fantastic storyline week 2 for the Argos is the fact that Ryan Dinwiddie gets his second Grey Cup with his teacher, quote unquote, on the other side of the field from him in Dave Dickinson, to where, you know, it's for him, hey, I got to show you, like, you taught me this. Now look at me. I'm kind of becoming the teacher very, very quickly as well. But just to my original point, I think they call it the Wild Wild West for a reason in the CFL.
The thing about the West this year is there are it's at a pivot point. Well, Corey Mason tried to build a culture in Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
The players that are there, and I can tell you, especially when he left the Argos and went and took the job last year in Saskatchewan, everyone knew that he was going to be a success. And he's a tone setter. He's the kind of guy, he's a player's coach, and he oozes a swagger about him that's just, it's infectious. And I watched it with that Argos defense. Mark Killam is interesting because he can do the same thing, but they're kind of at different points. Like, Mark Killam's in year 1, they spent a ton of money, brought in a ton of guys, irrespective of Ed Hervey's comments about stars or no stars in the CFL. But Mark Killam could have a real profound effect very quickly. And I watched his opening media conference, and just the way he was talking. The one thing about Edmonton that they've lacked for a while, they had the name change, they've had
ownership change,
the bottom fallout in attendance, some real terrible years, ton of turnover. They need to have that swagger again, because the one thing Rider fans might not like what I'm about to say, the Riders might be the standard bearer in terms of attendance, in terms of just the passion.
Yeah.
But Edmonton, like, there was a reason why they said, once, I mean, now they say once an elk, always an elk, but certainly they said something else before. But there's a pride in wearing the double E. And if Mark Kilman can bring that back and get the fans to come back, they could be a disruptor. I don't know if I wouldn't call them a Grey Cup favorite, but they could be a disruptor in the West. When I say pivot point, let's go back to Calgary. Dave Dickinson is not only a Hall of Famer, as a college quarterback, not only should be considered a Hall of Famer as a quarterback, you can certainly be considered a Hall of Famer as a head coach. But when you lose a quarterback and you have as much turnover as they have had over the last couple of years,
Yep.
it doesn't matter what kind of coach you are. There is certainly an effect that can happen. And I'm very lucky and I'm privileged to kind of be on the sidelines. And Dickinson has made this very, very clear that he sometimes thinks the media doesn't appreciate. He talked to me once about Cam Judge, and he said, people don't appreciate how much someone like Cam Judge sacrifices when he plays in this league. And the reason that Dickinson said that is that Dickinson he is so invested in everything he does because he cares so much about just good football. And it hasn't worked out for him over the last couple of seasons. And you can see a frustration out of him. Now, he might explain it away as just like, hey, this is what happens and I'm a coach and coaches are frustrated. Like there is a frustration that emerges when there isn't that kind of sense of inevitability about a team anymore. You can be frustrated when they were as good as they were, when they had Bo Levi Mitchell and they were just winning. And yeah, sure, we can certainly dissect their Grey Cup losses. But that frustration is different than the kind of frustration I saw last year, which was a team that, I'm sorry, that was not Stampeder football in what I've known in the time that I've covered the league. And I've covered the league since 2011. And that's the first time I was like, I know teams take dips, but I was like, whoa, these Stampeders are not very good. And I'm interested to see what happens this year because not only Dave Dickinson is probably certain they didn't hope that Reggie Beckington came out in the press and started calling out some of the younger guys on his team, saying some of these guys might be here for participation ribbons. It's going to be very key for him to get a handle on that very quickly because if they don't start well, and they have Vernon Adams Jr. here now, and everyone who's played with VA loves VA. There's no doubt about that. But for the first time, we're going to be looking at Dave Dickinson and being like, whoa, because he clearly, with Mark Killam going down to Edmonton, he was moved along from being the special teams coordinator, and then Brent Munson was moved along from being the defensive coordinator. Those guys are gone. So the last guy who's going to be sitting in a chair, who all of a sudden, when the music starts and then it stops, who may not have a chair if the Stampeders don't have a good season, might be Dave Dickinson. And that's surprising because I always thought that Dave Dickinson might have this. I thought that Dave Dickinson, and some people might think this is sacrilegious, but I thought he'd have the same aura to him as Michael Shea has built, but certainly someone like Don Matthews had, where he was just kind of this guy who is such a CFL lifer, so successful as a player and now as a coach, that you almost like he's impervious to everything else that happens in the league. Like he's able to adjust and adapt. And every coach is allowed to have a couple bad years. Like just because the Calgary Stampeders have had 2-3 poor seasons doesn't necessarily mean that all of a sudden like there are these huge systemic issues. But when you've set a standard as they did with Dickinson and Bo Levi Mitchell, and then it starts to dip as it has in this league, especially given how high the turnover rate is, at some point when the music stops, your chair is going to be taken out from under you. And I really wonder when we sit at that pivot point, we look at Mark Killam, when we look at Corey Mace and whether they're going to ascend. I mean, Michael Shea is he's in a different category just because of the tremendous success that he's had in Winnipeg, although he hates when anyone attributes it specifically to him. But Dave Dickinson's in that, he's on the other side of that pivot point. And if it starts to, those other teams start to do well and Calgary starts to dip, it might be Dave Dickinson who is the one who's going to have to answer the most questions and might be looking for a new job.
The other thing I could always see too is the quiet move upstairs that we see sometimes where it's more of like the football personnel role or like than just like, because I feel like what he's accomplished, it's just too hard to get rid of him. When I say like I'm bullish on them, it's just because look, we know it's a dog-eat-dog world in this league. There's only 9 teams, and there's only 6 teams make the playoffs each year. I know that's still a lot, but there are 3 teams that have to miss, and it's really hard to say, right? It's not hard to say, but it's not hard to say that Calgary has the potential to be one of those 3 instead of one of those 6, based off of what we saw last year. They do have a lot to prove, but even like another team we still have to talk about too, because it connects to Mike O'Shea, is BC with Buck Pierce taking over as head coach as well, where they're Not that there's a lot of expectation on them, but there's going to be a lot for, hey, they're getting a full season of Nathan Rourke. There's no like going to NFL camps and then coming back at the midway point at Labor Day of the season. Matthew Betts as well re-upped his contract there as well. One of the I believe one CFL defensive player of the year, most outstanding defensive player in 2023, to where you're getting those pieces back with a new head coach who's got a great offensive mind, to where it's BC's ceiling is very high. It was high last year too, but I think there were some games where they should have won, but they didn't. Like another example, and it ties back to the Argos too, but there's that week 1 game against BC when Cam Dukes had the fumble and they took it into the end zone, and then and then Toronto stayed resilient and won that game as a massive underdog when they had the whole world betting against them. So it just kind of ties back to now BC, where it's what's their identity? How loud is the Lion going to roar in 2025?
That's a good question.
I also had to do the pun,
This is a quarterback-driven league.
Yeah.
And so much expectation has been on Nathan Rourke. And at the CFL and TSN, particularly when we look at SportsCenter, we focus specifically and tremendously on the stars of the league. And I was disappointed when I saw out of Rourke last year. I saw someone who, for all the professionalism and talent that he inherently has,
yep,
he just didn't seem settled. And I know certainly from talking to Zach Collaros, the kind of coach that Buck Pierce is. I certainly know the connection that Buck Pierce has with BC. But they have to find a way of making Nathan Rourke find that groove again, that mojo that a couple of years ago we were like, this guy might be the greatest Canadian quarterback who's ever played the game. Like and he still has that potential. I mean, I'm sure his brother will want to go ahead and give him a run for his money. But yeah, I look at Nathan Rourke and I think now, and you said it very well, he doesn't have to worry about the NFL. And I'm not going to psychoanalyze him. I imagine, irrespective of whatever disappointment he had, whatever hurt feelings, whatever happened, that doesn't really matter. It's in the past. And he's a professional. He cares about the game. He cares about how he plays the game. But the team is going to it's going to succeed or fail with him. And that is just the truth of it. And certainly we can take a look at it and we'll be able to nitpick Buck Pierce and decisions, and this is a long season and all of that. But if Nathan Rourke gets back to 2023 Nathan Rourke, this is then all of a sudden you have a different conversation about how loud these Lions can roar. But I just hope that he has a better year, because a successful Nathan Rourke is good for the league, in untold ways. Like the fact that he's Canadian, the fact that, and I've said this, Nathan Rourke is the only quarterback and only CFL quarterback I've ever been around on the sidelines that when he throws the ball, I can hear it. It's like when he is within himself, he's incredible. But it's a very interesting year for him, and I'm excited to see what version of Nathan Rourke we get in 2025.
That's exactly it, because I feel like not a lot of fans understand that there's a very big mental aspect to the quarterback position. It's all because look, it's a pressure packed position. The guys who play it, they love it for a reason. You want to play it for a reason. But I completely agree with you. The mentals of, the NFL didn't work out. I'm back here. I'm not saying that in a bad way, but for him, there's always that rain. There was that rain cloud hovering around him. Now it's clean slate, new coach. And it's, like I said before, how loud will the Lion roar? But when I look, I also pulled up the schedule while you're talking, just see what week 1 was. And there are 2 games immediately that catch there's actually, I was going to say 2 that really catch my attention. But when I look at the week 1 slate, when you have Ottawa and Saskatchewan in the opener, there's a lot of stories to be told there of who's going to be what. Toronto, Montreal, for as much as I found it weird that Toronto wasn't opening at home, and that might be a scheduling thing. The fact that
questions about the CFL schedule. Welcome back to the CFL season.
I swear to God, all January, it was just everyone, where's the schedule? Where's the schedule? And then the schedule drops and everyone's complaining about it. It's like the same thing with the Bud Light stuff too, which a lot of people are against, but I look at it as, hey, a big sponsor, big partner wants to back the league. With Toronto, Montreal, though, you have storylines of the East final and how does Montreal bounce back and how does Toronto keep getting better. But it's that Saturday night at 10 o'clock. If you're up late enough for it out there, just because look, 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock, BC versus Edmonton, because that's a real good test for both sides. And there's also Calgary and Hamilton, which is the same as last year, which even again with that game, it's in the prime 7 o'clock spot where everyone's going to be seeing it, to where it's going to be, oh, so this is what the Stamps could be, or they have the potential to be. And then is it, hey, this team could be good, or hey, is this team at square one? But it's that Edmonton BC game where it's right away. We're going to not know, but we're going to get a sense of like, oh, this could be the Nathan Rourke's back game. This could be the game where he's coming for MOP. He really wants to establish his footprint again as one, like you're saying, one of the greatest Canadian quarterbacks to ever play in this league.
And truthfully, I always, because of how short the CFL preseason is, it's very difficult for us to look at the first 4 weeks and say, okay, we really know what a team is going to be. I mean, okay, I say that when we look at the 0-5 that the Hamilton Tiger-Cats had in the hole they dug themselves, and that doesn't help you, irrespective of when everyone else kind of decides that the water line has risen and that the quality of that season kind of shows itself. But week one's important. Like, week one is, irrespective of how short the preseason is. Like, Nathan Rourke coming out against an Edmonton team that wants to go, and Mark Killam said this in his opening pressers, I've already said, but he talked about just the identity they want to have, that kind of traditional sense of kind of pride and putting on the double E. There are a lot of show me who you are games right off the bat. And I'll be in Montreal for Argos Owls, and I can tell you the Owls were really looking forward to that East final. Jason Moss was really looking forward to hosting that East final, and it did not go the way they thought. And certainly they made a decision at quarterback after that game. And Davis Alexander, who he's got a swagger about him. He's got like a kind of like, you know what? F this. I got it. Give me the ball. Let's go. And the one thing that Jason Moss loves about him is he's a super competitor. And the one thing that Jason Moss loves is he loves guys who will go to the mat, get up, and keep going. And I know you were focusing on the West here, but when I look over at that other game, when I look at Davis Alexander, I'm like, okay, like, what do you got? Because behind him is McLeod Bethel-Thompson. And McLeod Bethel-Thompson, I think we can all kind of have debates on whether he's a starter or whether he's a backup. I think Davis Alexander is going to get on a long leash. And I think Jason Moss they have put the ball in his hands for a reason. And I don't think Danny Machocha and Jason Moss are going to pull the trigger and take it out of his hands very quickly. So he's going to get the opportunity to grow, but he can make his own statement too in week one against the defending Grey Cup champions. Like, as much as, you would have wanted the Argos perhaps, just given the fact that they're the Grey Cup champions to start, I honestly don't mind the league that put that game at Percival Molson. I don't mind it because the fans are going to be hot. It's Friday night football, and they're going to be ready. And I do expect that Davis Alexander will be ready.
And ready with their horns, I presume, as well. Which
don't remind me. Don't remind me. God bless those people in Montreal. I know those people who sit there, and they're lovely people. But it's just like, yeah, I spend 6-7 months not having to worry about it. And I mean, Kenzie Lalonde has to do those games far more than I do. But yeah, it's just part of the oeuvre, the milieu of the Canadian Football League.
Yeah, everyone's got their there's the cowbells, but I remember like just last year in the East Final, I was like, I'm watching in my living room, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, that is annoying. I can only imagine.
I had to do a whole hit, if you remember.
Yeah,
I did a whole hit during the game on the horns, and my producer Chris Edwards is like, "We're going to put you up there," and I don't mind. Like, I mean, it's the best job in the world.
Yeah.
But I remember kind of being there, going like, "Oh, like these horns." It's like the vuvuzelas in the 2010 World Cup. It's just incessant and intentional. Like this isn't just like we're trying to make noise. No, we're trying to make noise to be a distraction, to be an irritant, so that you notice us. So that's again, like it's just part of the Owls culture, and that's I as much as I'm fine with it, pack your earplugs.
What an answer. Professional journalism 101, folks. A couple more before we get out of here. Just you as a storyteller yourself, like you're saying how this league has many stories to be told, something actually Mike Hogan told me yesterday. Is there a particular story or person or player you want to hone in on to, like, not tell their story, but be like, hey, this is a story that needs to be told during the 2025 season?
That's an excellent question. I mean, sometimes stories reveal themselves over time. But there's two that are very interesting to me, and they're both in the Rough Riders. Trevor Harris, I've been very lucky to cover the Canadian Football League for as long as I have. And the two quarterbacks that are the same age as I am, and I'll be 40 at the end of the year, they're just a little younger than me, but we all kind of, they both, well, one of them looks older than me, but it's the regulars of football. And the other one looks younger than me, because I know how much he pays attention to his body. One is Zach Collaros. And he just looks like he looks like a football player. He could be, I always say this about, I'm deviating a little bit, but I say this about Mike O'Shea and Zach Collaros. They would be a transformative quarterback and coach in any era of the CFL. Like, you could put Zach Collaros and Mike O'Shea in any era of the CFL, and they would be just as great. Trevor Harris continues to be on a pursuit, and that pursuit is a Grey Cup ring. Now, he has two of them. He was the third-string quarterback in 2012 with the Argos, and he was the backup. Backup to Henry Burris in Ottawa in 2016, when he pretty much led them to the Grey Cup. Now, I know Henry Burris will kind of debate me on that, especially when we get to the playoffs. But that was a huge call that was made. And I know how much he said it to me. Trevor Harris wants that ring. And I think he will play as long as he can to get it. And for me, that's an interesting, that shows you, as much as we talk about this being a 19 league, as much as we talk about the comparisons with the NFL, there is something about the pursuit of the Grey Cup that really matters to people. I remember Milt Stegall talking about, like, he jokes regularly on the CFL and TSN about it, but he doesn't have a ring, and he's the greatest receiver who ever played in the Canadian Football League. And I know it's on his mind. Anthony Calvillo won a bunch of Grey Cups, but went for a period of time where he would get to the Grey Cup and not win, and people were asking questions about his legacy. And I'm not necessarily putting Trevor Harris in the Anthony Calvillo category, but I am saying this.
Is it like Cody Fajardo?
Well, Cody Fajardo is different. Cody Fajardo is a guy who felt like no one gave him a shot. And then that incredible win, like whatever happens in Cody Fajardo's career, he's written into CFL history in the most dramatic way possible with that drive and that toss to Philpott. But Trevor Harris is just like it weighs on him. But he is so committed. It's fascinating. And the other story on Saskatchewan is AJ Ouellette. AJ Ouellette spoke openly about his mental health to me in a feature and interview that will be shown at some point in the season. He went through a divorce that was very tough a couple of years ago, and he and I actually had a very honest, raw conversation after one of our sit-downs. And I realized, especially with a guy who is as invested in his community in Ohio as AJ Ouellette is as invested in this game as he is, he has now kind of used the CFL as a way of awakening a deeper perspective within himself about who he is as a man, who he is as a football player, and who he is as a member of the most popular franchise in the league. And to watch him kind of figure himself out, I find it very touching. I find it incredibly touching, because especially someone in that position, how expendable we think football players are, but especially running backs, how much he carries both emotionally and physically. I mean, if you've ever seen a squat video of AJ Ouellette, it's ridiculous what the man can push. But the fact that he is using his journey as a football player to really understand who he is in a raw sense is admirable and something I'll be watching, because if the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and let me be clear about this, when the Roughriders win a Grey Cup, it's very different. I was there in 2013. I have said this story a million times. I was on the field when Ricky Foley led the Riders out against the Saskatchewan Roughriders, against the Hamilton Tire Cats. And I remember looking at my good friend at TSN, Jermaine Franklin, and just the ground was literally shaking when the Riders came out. And I said, if the Riders don't win, we're going to die here tonight. like I just to see it would be poetic. And I'm not saying I don't root for anybody. Like I have guys who I'm fans of in the league, but if they're able to lead the Riders to a Grey Cup, what it would mean to them and what it would mean to that province would be pretty special. Other stories they kind of evolve and guys reveal themselves as the season goes on. But when I look at someone who is pursuing a championship the way that Trevor Harris has, the way he tries to change himself every single offseason, the way that he tries to pursue something new and try a new skill every single offseason, is in pursuit of a championship. All he wants is that ring that he can call his own. And all AJ Ouellette wants is to be able to look himself in the mirror as a man more than a football player and just be happy with the kind of man that he is. And I just find those stories so fascinating because, my colleagues, I don't profess to sit down and like I understand the game. Like I've been saying this for a long time. I can't watch football anymore from up high. I do have a problem watching it on TV because I've been so lucky to watch it. When you watch it from the field, you see it from a completely different perspective. And I've been able to be at hundreds and hundreds of games and watch it and watch the emotions, watch the sacrifice, watch what it actually takes. When you're removed from it, the more the distance grows, it's kind of there can be a physics to it. The more the distance grows between the viewer and the game, the opinions kind of get louder because people are like, well, you should have done this on this play, should have done that and that. The closer you get, the more you realize these guys are hitting each other, and they're sacrificing and they're putting their bodies on the line, and to continue that pursuit, to keep coming back every single week, to leave your family, to come up here to the Canadian Football League. And sure, we can talk about the different metrics. Like guys are still making very good money. Like the top end guys in this league are making excellent money, but they're not making the transformative generational wealth that NFL players are making. But the fact that they come up here and they make that sacrifice every single year, irrespective of the team they play for, irrespective of like
the love of the game,
all the other circumstances, like I'm just in awe of a lot of guys, and it's one of the reasons why I love the league so much is that that intent to say no, like this is my league and this is what I want, this is what I'm choosing. And when I've watched guys grab the Grey Cup, to see what it means to them, and I'll finish with this. I've never touched the Grey Cup and I never will. Not because I have anything against it. I know what these guys go through. And I know what it means to them when you finally get to hold it, the oldest professional football trophy in the world. And I have seen men become boys again, like just holding it. And I don't root for Saskatchewan to win, but if it ends up that Trevor Harris is standing up on the dais at the end of the year and holding that Grey Cup, a part of me will feel very happy for him. In the same way that I've felt very happy for Zach Collaros when he's won, in the same way that I have felt very happy for Levi Mitchell when I saw it. Like you get to appreciate guys and their journeys. And one thing I always do at the end of every Grey Cup is I go to every player that I know personally who I have a good personal relationship with. I just shake their hand and I say, congratulations. Like I know what this means and I understand it. And it's the one we talk about stories and investment and kind of understanding what the league is. To be very lucky as I am to understand their stories, to be at field level and to see what it actually means for them when they win a championship and what it takes for them to win a championship. It's the most humbling experience that I've had in my professional career.
As a 1-year veteran of high school football, I kind of understand the on-field metrics of it 15 years ago. But no, I love the sentiment. And I just want to go back to what I said when I was trying to compare Harris and Fajardo. I just meant more or less of he wants one that's his own. Like how Cody has the one Grey Cup Cody has the Grey Cup that's his own. That the drive, also to the speaker catch, the Austin Mack catch. There's just so many moments from that Hamilton game that just
one of the greatest drives I've ever seen live. Like like that will go down, especially that third down throw to Cole Speaker.
Yeah,
it was like there was the pass itself. I know we're kind of going on a tangent, but just to watch that ball, and I'm like, the ball's floating in the air. I'm like, holy geez, he's going to catch this, and they're going to they're in excellent position to win this game. It was Yeah, there's just so many moments I can count on my fingers. I don't have enough fingers and toes to count on some of the incredible moments I've watched in this league.
Although I'm pretty sure I did see a reel last year of you flicking the trophy at media day, but that may have just been a figurative
No,
thing.
that was, you know what that was? I'll tell you what that was. I'm going to help my colleague Claire Hanna. Claire Hanna, it was kind of, when you just like, I don't know how to describe
okay,
it. Like, it's just like ting, like, you're just.
So you consider a social media star.
Yeah, social media. But no, I will never a lot of people, they love being holding the Grey Cup, and it's not that I'm against that. I love it. I want people to Canadians should hold that. It's literally part of our country's history.
Yeah.
But I stay away from it, not because it's just different for me. Because I have seen guys especially when guys lose. When guys lose and they know they're not going to hold that trophy, I have watched the strongest men I have ever met in my life become just dissolve because they will not. Think about this, and I'm not putting a finer point on him, but Samoy Lawrence will never do that.
Yeah,
Samoy Lawrence is one of the greatest in the modern era of the Canadian Football League. For the last 25 years, Samoy Lawrence is not only the face of a franchise in the Hamilton Tiger Cats, he is one of the great linebackers in the last 25 years.
Great person too.
A great person, great guy. One of the greatest ambassadors of this league. And he'll never hold the Grey Cup that way. And when Brandon Banks did, and I wasn't there, I was at the World Cup at the time. But when I saw that the Argos won, when I woke up and I saw that the Argos had won the Grey Cup, the first thought I had was, good for Speedy. Speedy finally got his championship. And that's yeah, I mean I could give you a rant for another hour about just what seeing guys
like
Enoch what that championship means and ultimately what that trophy means. It's just the fact that we're back here and the fact that the season starting again and we're on this journey, all the stories that are going to evolve as the season goes on. Yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be awesome.
There's one player on Toronto for me, just because obviously, that's the team I pay the most attention to for reasons that I don't think I need to get into. But mine is, and I know he was hurt a lot last year, but he had a great playoff. But it's just the evolution of Dejan Brissett as a player, because he spoke about how 22 he wasn't in the biggest involvement, but how last year that Grey Cup was a huge factor in him winning. I want to continue to see his involvement not only as a player but a person, because I follow him on social media and I know a lot of the work that he does as a local 905 kid. Just the overall encompassing of him as a human being. That's just a storyline for me. But I love the Trevor Harris one, because even I said Enoch as well, because that's the one memory I have from that 22 is just him overcome literally breaking down, just showing you, hey, it how much it means just to get to that mountaintop. And we're gonna see, no matter who is there come November, and like I said, in Winnipeg's cold, it's going to be a hell of a story.
Yeah, and look, listen, I'll go through quickly. Montreal going to a new quarterback, but having built something sustainable.
Yes.
Under Jason Moss, if they get to a championship and they've got the weapons to do it, there is nothing. And obviously they won a couple of years ago, but there's very few things in this league that are as unique as the Montreal Alouettes, just because of the culture, just because they're French, well, sorry, not French, Quebecois, and just just what that means to that franchise. Ottawa, I know Sean Burke personally. He has sacrificed a lot to get to this point to kind of build his vision of what a successful championship team would be. For them to get back on the mountaintop would mean a lot to him. Drew Brown certainly as well in becoming a new face of the league. The Hamilton Tiger Cats. I mean, I was there when Jalen Eklund had literally the Grey Cup on his fingertips. I was standing in front of him in the end zone, and he had it on his fingertips. And I close my eyes and I think about I was there when Brandon Banks had the block in the back that called back his what would have been had that not been a called a penalty, it would have been the greatest return in CFL history, bar none. And the Ticats don't have their magical moment, and they're still searching for it. And the Argos, they would be a dynasty if they won a third Grey Cup in 4 seasons. I mean, they're locked in as a dynasty. And Winnipeg, the ability to get back to the mountaintop, they've had a lot of changes, but this could be one last ride for a lot of guys, certainly without Adam Bighill now in the mix, that he's moved on. Saskatchewan, I've already mentioned what it would mean for Trevor Harrison, AJ Ouellette, and a new culture built by Corey Chamberlain. Dave Dickinson, if he can go ahead and there's no monkey on his back because he's already a Hall of Famer in a lot of respects, but
Absolutely.
he could prove himself. He could prove a lot of people. He could prove himself right. He could prove himself right. And like again, the one guy we could talk about everybody else, but Vernon Adams Jr. You talk about a guy who has sacrificed and what he has done in this league. We could have a whole podcast just on VA's story. And winning would be something for him. I mean, Edmonton to get back, they haven't won since 2015. BC and Nathan. I mean, my goodness, every single team. This is what we get to. This is how wonderful the CFL is that any team can do it. Like any team, you could legitimately say, "Yep, go across the board with all 9 teams," and all of them really do have a tremendous story at this point. It's June, and everybody can be a Grey Cup champion in June. But everyone can have a stake in putting their hand on the cup this year.
That's kind of the beautiful thing about it, though, is the fact that you can make a reason for why every single team has a reason to get there and why it would be special for them to be at the mountaintop come November. It's kind of a nice poetic justice in a way, if you will.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and certainly I one of the great moments. I've been very lucky to have gone to a World Cup and know how enormous on a macro level that whole thing is. The Grey Cup itself is something so unique, so ours. And again, not to repeat myself, I just know what it means to all of these guys. Like I know what it means to someone like a Tavares McFadden, like a guy who was cut for the season last year for the Argos, came in and created his own tea time. Like the guy who would show up with the right bat down, with the right pick at the right time, and he was the guy. And like that's the kind of stuff that you love about this league. It's I'm excited. I can't wait. This is going to be a special season for me. I mean, I look at the World Cup in 2026, and I won't be a part of the beginning of next year, and I'll be probably gone for most of the year until Labor Day. So I'm really enjoying this league because this season, because it's just one of those opportunities when you go from start to finish, and I really haven't had that for the last couple of seasons just because of other obligations with Canada Soccer. But this particular year, although I'll be off for 3 weeks for the Gold Cup and I'll miss about 2 games, but I'll be here from wire to wire, and I'm looking forward to it.
We love to see it. We love to hear it. I got to thank you for this amazing conversation we were able to have today, Matthew. Hopefully you and I reach some people as well to where, hey, they want to check out the league, get to know the league. But if people want to check you out and see what kind of stylish Converse you might be rocking on a week-to-week basis, where can people find you on not only your socials, but your work with TSN? Like if there's an online platform, obviously I know about it, but I want you to tell the people.
I appreciate that. I'm, TSN Scianitti on all my social medias. The one thing I love, and I feel very lucky, is I love when people just come up to me and they want to chat. I never expected to be in this position. I know how lucky I am, and I don't say that like flippantly. Like I feel like the luckiest dude in the world that I get to do this job. And knowing, especially this league, especially what it means now when we talk about the context of Canadian pride, you want to talk to people. You want to take their energy. You want to give your energy, because this is just something very, very special. And especially when we look at the context of how much people are talking about their pride as Canadians, it's one of those things that because this is ours and there's nothing like it, because there isn't another. I mean, maybe you could talk about Irish Gaelic sports and the Aussie rules football as something unique to those countries. But when you talk about professional football, especially when that the NFL is so close to us, the CFL is so unique and so special in its own way that when people embrace the league and understand that, it's not about comparisons. It's not about measuring this guy versus this league versus that league, this 3-down football versus 4-down football. It is its own thing. It is unto itself. And that's a long-winded way of saying always come and say hi, because I'm always happy to talk to any CFL fan. about the game. I'm always love to talk about people's passions for the game, their own stories. That's the one thing. Seeing old friends is how I talk. When I say that the CFL season's coming back, I describe it as seeing old friends.
That's a perfect way to describe it, because I like, out of all my friend circles that I still like, there's a part of this like CFL people that you're included in, that like something like yesterday was just so cool to get to experience, to sit and watch and talk. And also I'm gonna have a story coming out on Tavares. I got to talk to him yesterday, sometime probably later this week, as well as Ryan Hunter. But I can't thank you enough for the wonderful conversation you are able to have. Hopefully it's definitely not the last time you and I get to do this on this platform and in person at BMO Field or even Hamilton Stadium. But anyway, guys, look, the season's 16 days away. I want to thank Matthew Scianitti once again for joining me on this episode of YWC Football Talk, which actually was the 360th episode of the program.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you. We'll be back for 361 tomorrow with another Matt, but you'll have to stay tuned for that. But anyway, guys, CFL, keep it unreal. Have a good day.